Well, the topic of the week this week seems to be whether or not the high school PE teachers should be strapped, or arming teachers, or as the president said, arming 20% of the teachers in a school who are adept with firearms, and we'll give them a little bit of a bonus. And this is not a new argument. It's usually an argument that comes up from the pro-gun side of our politics every time there's a school shooting, and or a big school shooting, I should say, because every time there's a school shooting, it's not in the news. The stupidest thing that I heard, and I'm sorry to offend, but it was just a stupid comment, and it came from the president, was that if you have armed teachers in these schools, then you won't have these school shootings anymore. Implying that having armed teachers on campus is a deterrent, and that's the stupid part, is thinking that it's a deterrent. If you don't look at this most recent school shooting in Florida, and if you look at some other mass shootings in the United States, I hate to keep bringing this up, but if you look at Sandy Hook, if you look at Las Vegas, if you look at Virginia Tech, all of those shooters were killed by self-inflicted gunshot wounds. They weren't afraid to die. Them dying was part of the plan. And if somebody is already planning on being dead at the end of their attack, explain to me how it's a deterrent that they're going to be going around armed people. They're planning on dying anyway. The only thing that you can argue is, well, maybe they won't do it because they won't kill as many people. Fair point. But it's not a deterrent to the attack. If they're not afraid to die, they cannot be deterred by people who are armed. It's just not going to happen. Death is part of their plan. So that's my original thing to add into this, and a lot of other things that I've seen against the whole idea of arming teachers that I've seen from other websites and social media pages and things like that include the fact of who's going to pay for it. I mean, I assume that they're not suggesting that the sophomore English teacher be walking around with an AR-15 strapped to her back, right? They're talking about concealed carry. They're talking about a concealed carry handgun, and nobody knows which teacher is armed. That's kind of the plan. Who's going to pay for it? Is the federal government going to pay for it? Is the state? Is the school district? Or is the teacher going to have to buy that firearm out of their own pocket, pay for their own training, and pay for their own ammunition, and pay for their own continuing ammunition so that they can continue to train? Because you can't just, if you're going to be trained to handle a firearm, you can't just carry it. You have to go down to a shooting range periodically and check your proficiency. You just have to. That's just responsible. But, so, who's going to pay for all of that? The teachers that they're saying need to carry. That's who's going to pay for it. After Sandy Hook, there was a lot of talk here in my state of Texas of arming teachers. And our Texas state legislature passed a bill allowing school marshals in school districts. But the thing was, it was an unnecessary bill because Texas state law already allows teachers to be armed. It's up to the local school boards whether or not they're going to allow it. And those school boards, multiple school boards in the state of Texas, a minority of school boards in the state of Texas, have gone to arming teachers. Some of them have gone with the school marshal plan, which is like one firearm on campus for every set number of students. I think it's somewhere around 250. Others have just been any teacher with a license to carry is able to. And this whole idea of arming teachers, this actually, came from teachers. It came from teachers who are far-right Republicans who think that they should be able to carry because they've already got a few different concealable handguns in a gun safe at home. And they're going to say, well, I know what I'm doing and all of that. And so they start bringing it up. So no, I'm not going to go with the folks who say, well, no, God forbid we pay our teachers more, or God forbid they ask for school supplies. But let's let them pack. But yeah, I am reasonably sure that the idea originally came from teachers who were major, NRA members and gun rights supporters that just want to be able to carry, and they think that they can be Charles freaking Bronson and just be able to take the guy out, which is not smart. If you've got 7 or 8 or a dozen or 20%, in my school that'd be a dozen teachers or more that are armed. If there's an active shooter situation, and just a couple of those teachers go out into the hallway and start looking for the guy who's walking around firing rounds off indiscriminately, and they come across each other and just see somebody with a gun, they're going to shoot the other teacher. The police show up, they don't know who's shooting, they just know that somebody's shooting, and they walk into the hallway and they see you walking around with a gun. They're not going to ask if you're on their side, they're just going to drop you. That's not being thought of in this whole argument. Liability of an accidental discharge or an unintended discharge. Most modern pistols have safeguards that won't allow them to fire if the pistol is dropped, where the firing pin or the striker won't impact the primer of the ammunition and have it fire. But we're also talking about elementary schools here, thanks to Sandy Hook, right? A first grader is going to see it while the kindergarten teacher's sitting on the ground, or a kindergartner will see it, play with it, pull the trigger, boom, right there in the middle of story time. Let's just ignore the fact that teachers, and I know something about this because I am one, I don't make enough money. I got to have a little bit of supplement from Uber, and I'm not the only one at my school that does that. We're strapped on that. We're also expected to be counselors. We're also expected to be to identify abuse. We're also expected to essentially teach a different lesson for every kid in the class because of different learning styles. We have all kinds of paperwork that we're buried under. You want to add this on top of that? Fine. Teachers are tough. We can handle the extra workload. But you know what? It'd be nice to be compensated for it. And the idea of a little bit of a bonus, that just sounds like, oh, yeah, go ahead and do it. We'll just give you $5. It's okay. But that's even admitting that if it's a good idea, which it's not a good idea. It is just not a good idea. The whole justification is that it would be a deterrent to shooters, and it will not be a deterrent to a shooter who's going into a school planning on turning the gun on himself when he's done. It's not going to deter him. Yes, it might lower the number of victims that shooter takes out, but it's not going to stop him. And the deterrent is the argument that's being made, not lessen the numbers. If you want to lessen the numbers, don't let him have his hands on a rifle that can carry 100 rounds of ammunition and fire a round every second. Every time you pull the trigger, every time you move your finger, you can move your finger real fast. The Tucson shooter wasn't using an AR-15. He was using a Glock handgun with a 30-round extended magazine, 33, I think. And he only got stopped because somebody tackled him when he was reloading. If he hadn't had that extended round magazine, he wouldn't have got off half the shots he got off. Yet we can't talk about those. Governor Rick Scott of Florida is now saying we should, raise the age of buying a rifle, to buying any kind of firearm, to 21. Well, that's a good step. Let's ban bump stocks. That's a good step. I mean, he suggested good steps. But here's the thing. And the president said, let's ban bump stocks as well. The bump stocks were the issue of the shooting in October, 5 months ago in Las Vegas. It takes a school shooting to make us act on one that happened in Las Vegas that killed 58 people. plus the shooter who killed himself. And armed guards do not act as a deterrent to somebody who is bound and determined to do harm. And gun rights advocates are going to say, well, you ban assault rifles, someone who's bound and determined to do harm is going to find a way to get one. Yeah, someone who is a criminal is going to break the law. But now the attempt at trying to get it, that becomes a way for law enforcement to maybe stop him before he actually gets to the shooting. So there's that. But if he's not going to be deterred, if their argument is he's not going to be deterred because it's against the law, why is he going to be deterred because there's armed guards? Well, all we got to do is point to the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan. He's surrounded by Secret Service agents who are all armed. They're all right there. And not only are they all armed, they're all highly, highly trained. And they're all willing to stand in front of that bullet to protect the president. And yet a shooter still shot him. John Hinckley still shot him. Not a deterrent. So, that's my point. I basically said that in the first 30 seconds of the video. Sorry for being a day late on this one, but it's probably because I'm $1 short. I will see you next week.